Let me read to you a passage from the first chapter of St. Mark's Gospel, verses 21 to 28. It's the Gospel for the fourth Sunday in Ordinary Time, Year B. St. Mark writes, "They went to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, Jesus went into the synagogue and began to teach. The people were amazed at his teaching, because he taught them as one who had authority, not as the teachers of the law. Just then, a man in their synagogue who was possessed by an evil spirit cried out, 'What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God.' 'Be quiet,' said Jesus sternly. 'Come out of him.' The evil spirit shook the man violently and came out of him with a shriek. The people were all so amazed that they asked each other, 'What is this? A new teaching, and with authority. He even gives orders to evil spirits, and they obey him.' News about him spread quickly over the whole region of Galilee." That's from Mark chapter 1, verses 21 to 28. Among other things, it reminds us of heaven. What do I mean? Well, it's often observed that when we look ahead, time seems to move slowly. The end point is distant. But when we look back, time seems to have passed quickly. The beginning point seems not far back. Each day can seem to be similar, for often when we look back on the day, it seems to have passed quickly. It can be the same with the past week, the past month, the past year. When we come to the end of our lives, the whole of our life will seem to have passed quickly, and we shall wonder what we have done with it. An account will be rendered. Life is short, and we'd better understand this because eternity is very long. During life, we often think of the future so as to prepare for it. Parents choose a school for their children in view of their future. Students study with a view to their future exams and their future careers. A young couple prepares for their future marriage and their future family. A man embarks on a career path in view of a future he hopes will be his. People save and contribute to superannuation in view of their future retirement. And yet, a great many people do not think of their future just a little beyond this, which is to say, beyond death. That future stage is the real future, which will never end. Everything depends on what our future will be then. Then our present state will seem a brief flash of time, and yet we will recognize clearly how all-important it was. Everything, our entire eternity, depends on how we live this moment of time which we call our life. What is it that awaits the person after death? What awaits him will pivot on whether he has been faithful to the dictates of his conscience and the commandments of God as Christ and the Church teach them. Immediately after death, there is the judgment of God, following which the soul is either saved forever or lost forever. If a person is saved, there would normally be a purification in what the Church calls purgatory from all the effects of sin before being admitted in an entirely holy state into the presence of God forever. On admission into the definitive presence of God, the bliss of heaven begins, the bliss of being face to face with the God who is infinite love, goodness and beauty. It will mean being engulfed in total happiness forever. The one alternative to this is a horrifying thought. Our life will have been a success if it results in gaining heaven. It will have been a catastrophic failure if it results in the loss of heaven. In respect to heaven, our place therein will depend on the degree to which we have loved and obeyed God here on earth, and the degree to which we have led others to God and to heaven. In view of this, we have an awesome responsibility to save our own souls and the souls of others. In heaven, our souls will be with God and with the saints and angels till the end of time, when we receive our glorified bodies back again. During that period, between our death and the end of time, those in heaven enjoy the sight and company of God and of all in heaven. And with the angels and the saints, they pray fervently to God for those still on earth. Then, at the end of time, Christ will come again to judge the living and the dead, and of his kingdom there will then be no end. Heaven and hell will be made the final abode for those who deserve the one or the other. Then there will be a new heaven and a new earth. Yes, a new earth, transformed and glorified as our final home, just as our bodies will have been transformed and glorified in some mysterious and wonderful sense. All will be utter happiness and love. We will live forever in a new heaven and a new earth, in which every tear will have been wiped away. We find it almost impossible to imagine a place and a state of utter happiness because it is completely beyond our experience. Here on earth, our times and moments of happiness are limited and mixed with unhappiness. But there in heaven, every trace of sorrow will be gone, transformed and purified of all that is not the joy and goodness of God. It will last forever and forever, such that however far in the future we will be with God in this heavenly joy, there will still be an eternity of it ahead. Let us think of our final home a lot. How can we get there? In our Gospel we read of Christ in conflict with Satan. Mark chapter 1 verse 21 to 28. We gain heaven as a result of right choices. We must make a choice between Christ and Satan, between the love of God and the love of self and sin. We gain heaven by choosing to follow our Lord very closely, by trying to put on the mind and heart of Christ. Now not I, St. Paul writes, but Christ lives in me. Christ is in you, St. Paul writes, your hope of glory. So then, let us so live that Christ lives in us now, in order to live in us forever, where there will be the new heaven and the new earth, world without end. I once watched a television interview with Father Patrick Peyton in his old age. He had led the great family prayer and rosary crusades of the middle of the 20th century and had produced numerous popular biblical film shows with the aid of accomplished Hollywood actors. He said in the interview that he looked forward to death because it would involve meeting God. Heaven is our hope. Christ is in the faithful Christian and is his hope of glory.